Rest well, traveller. You've found a place beyond the end, where no sorrow follows and no shadow lingers. Tonight, we journey deep into the hidden realm the ancients called Elysium, a land where the righteous walk through meadows of soft light, where time forgets its grip, and the soul finally comes home. This will be a seamless narration of one flowing story. No noise, no interruptions, only calm words and timeless myths. If this kind of story brings you peace, then subscribing would mean you'll have a new tale waiting for you each night. Elysium was the final resting place for the souls of heroes and men who had lived virtuous lives, a realm set apart from the fate of ordinary mortals, where peace and beauty awaited those who had earned it through their deeds. The ancients spoke of two distinct realms of Elysium, each with its own nature and guardians, the islands of the blessed and the Lethian fields of the underworld. The first of these, known also as the White Island or the Islands of the Blessed, was a paradise beyond the mortal world, reserved for the great heroes of myth. It lay far away, in the westernmost stream of the endless river Oceanus, where the sun's light lingered warmly, and the air was free from the harsh winds and sorrows of the earth. This island realm was ruled either by the Titan king Kronos, freed from his ancient bonds, or by Rhadamanthys, the wise son of Zeus, who judged the souls of the righteous. The second Elysium lay within the underworld, apart from the gloom and shadows of Hades, and separated from its darker regions by the gentle flow of the river Lethy. Here were wide, pleasant fields, bathed in soft light, promised to the initiates of the sacred mysteries, those who had lived with virtue and purity, whose hearts had been prepared through secret rites for this place of peace. The gods tied to these mysteries and the journey to Elysium were Persephone, queen of the underworld and guide of souls, Iacchos, the bright torchbearer, Triptolemos, the bringer of grain, Hecate, the guardian of thresholds, Zagreus, the Orphic form of Dionysos, Melanoi, the shadowy daughter of Persephone, and Macareas, the Blessed One. In time, as the belief in the cycle of reincarnation took root in the classical world, the vision of Elysium shifted. The two realms were sometimes placed in tiers, so that a soul who had entered the Elysium of the underworld 3 times, having lived worthily in 3 separate lives, would, upon their 4th death, be granted eternal dwelling in the islands of the blessed, among the immortal heroes forever. Yet Elysium was not always imagined the same way, for the idea evolved through the ages. Homer, in the earlier songs, knew of no such place, sending even the greatest heroes to the common shadowed halls of Hades. Hesiod and many poets after him spoke instead of a bright and paradisal realm kept only for heroes, where sorrow could not follow. Later, the Roman poets, like Virgil, wove the 2 visions into one, where the fields of the virtuous dead and the isles of heroes were joined as a single land of joy. In the late days of Greek thought, some sought to give the legend a place in the world, claiming the White Island was a real land near the mouth of the river Danube in the Black Sea, and that the islands of the blessed might be certain far-off lands in the Atlantic Ocean. In the Greek tongue, the words Elysium and Hades were not fixed as names, but were often adjectives, describing places, as in Pedian Elysium, the Elysian plain, or Domos Haidu, the house of Hyde. The origin of the name Elysium is uncertain. Some believed it came from the word eleuso, meaning to relieve or release, perhaps from suffering or pain. Others thought it might be tied to the name of the town of Eleusis, where the Eleusinian mysteries were held, rites which promised blessedness after death. Within the songs and tales of classical literature, Elysium was described as a true home for heroes. In the islands of the blessed on the White Isle, or in the Elysian fields, dwelt those whose deeds had lifted them above the mortal fate. Among the early heroes said to have been taken, there were Cadmos and Harmonia of Thebes, whose trials and wanderings had ended in peace. Lycos, son of Poseidon, strong and swift. Rhadamanthus, son of Zeus, whose wisdom made him a ruler in death as in life. Alcmene, the mortal mother of Heracles. Medea, the daughter of Aeetes, famed for her knowledge of magic. And Orpheus, the peerless musician, who came to be with his beloved Eurydice once more. From the age of the Trojan War came Macareas, swift of foot and unmatched in battle. Aias, son of Telamon, unyielding in courage. Aias, son of Oileus. Antilochus, son of Nestor, who fell young and noble. Diomedes, son of Tydeus, wise in counsel. Helen, daughter of Zeus, whose beauty stirred great wars. Iphigenia, daughter of Agamemnon, whose fate had been bound to the will of the gods. Memnon, son of the dawn goddess Eos. Menelaus, son of Atreus, king of Sparta. Neoptolemos, son of Achilles. Patroclus, dearest companion to the swift-footed hero. Penelope, wife of Odysseus, whose faith endured. Telegonos, son of Odysseus, and Telemachus, son of Odysseus, whose journeys ended here. Among those born in Elysium itself was Euphorion, son of Achilles. The list was never complete, for any hero who lived with courage, who upheld honor, or who endured with strength could find a place there. In this land, whether on the shining islands of the western sea, or in the soft meadows beyond the Lethy, there was no pain, no toil, no shadow, only the gentle passing of days in the company of the noble and the just, where the glory of deeds done in life shone forever in the peace of death. A hero cult in ancient Greece was believed to bring the soul of a hero upon death to the bright and peaceful realm of Elysium. In the words of Homer in the Odyssey, the prophetic sea god Proteus spoke to King Menelaus, telling him that it was not his fate to die in his homeland of Argos. Instead, the deathless ones would carry him far away, to the very edge of the world, to the wide and shining Elysian fields, where golden-haired Rhadamanthus dwelled. In that place, the days of men were free from toil, untouched by the burden of labor. No snow fell there, no storms or tempests ever broke the calm skies. For the comfort of its blessed inhabitants, the great river Oceanus sent forth the gentle singing breezes of the west, the soft Aeta Zephyrioi, which flowed endlessly. These blessings were given to him by the will of the gods, who remembered that his wife was Helen, and that her father was none other than Zeus himself. In another passage of the Odyssey, Homer tells of how the shades of the dead, their voices high and thin, travelled together in the company of Hermes, the guide of souls. He led them downward into the shadowed paths of the underworld, through damp and misty ways. They passed the streams of Oceanus, the bright and gleaming white rock, the great gates of the sun, and the strange and quiet land of dreams. Soon they came to the field of Asphodel, a wide plain where the souls of the dead, pale phantoms without flesh, made their dwelling for all time. Hesiod, in his Works and Days, told of another vision of the blessed. He wrote that Zeus, son of Cronos, created yet another race of men upon the fertile earth, a fourth generation, more noble and righteous than those before them, a godlike race of hero men known as the demigods. This race lived before the age of mortal men now upon the earth. Many of them were destroyed by the cruel hand of war and the violence of battle. Some fell in the land of Cadmos at seven-gated Thebes, where they fought for the flocks of Oedipus. Others met their end after they had crossed the great gulf of the sea in ships, to fight at Troy for the sake of rich-haired Helen. There too, death claimed them. Yet not all perished. To the others, Father Zeus gave a life and a dwelling apart from the mortal race. He placed them at the farthest ends of the earth, in the shining islands of the blessed, where deep swirling Oceanus washed the shores. There they lived as happy heroes, free from sorrow, in a land where the earth gave forth its honey-sweet fruits, 3 times in each year, blooming without fail. They were far from the company of the deathless gods, yet they lived in the peace of their rule under Kronos. For Zeus, the father of gods and men, had freed him from his ancient chains. In this place, these last of the heroes were honored, and their glory was unending. Arctinus of Miletus, in the Ethiopis, told how the Achaeans, after the great battles at Troy, buried Antilochus with honor and prepared the body of Achilles for the pyre. But before the fire could consume him, his mother Thetis came, lamenting the death of her son. She lifted him away from the flames and bore him across the sea, carrying him to the White Island, the Nissos Luke, a place beyond the mortal world. Sinethon of Sparta, or perhaps Eugamon of Cyrene, in the tale of the Telegony, told of Telegonos, son of Circe and Odysseus, who in a tragic turn learned the truth of his actions too late. In all these tales, the fate of the heroes was bound to the idea of a place beyond pain and beyond the reach of mortal grief, whether in the golden meadows of Elysium, in the bright white island, or in the far-off islands of the blessed. It was a place set apart for those who had lived greatly and died with honor, where the passage of time was gentle, the earth was generous, and the winds sang softly from the endless stream of Oceanus. Telegonos, not knowing the truth of his father's identity, struck him down, and only later learned the weight of what he had done. With grief and duty mingled, he gathered the body of his father, and with Penelope and Telemachus journeyed to the island of his mother, Aiaia. There, Circe received them, and by her power, she made them immortal. In this way, Telegonos was joined in marriage with Penelope, and Telemachus with Circe. The making of them immortal was understood to mean they were carried beyond the mortal world into Elysium, the land where no shadow of death could touch them. In the words of Pindar, when the hour of death comes, those whose hearts had been void of mercy, whose lives had been stained with wrong, were called to account. Below the earth, a judge, whether Minos or Rhadamanthes, held trial for the deeds of the world above. By the unbending hand of necessity, he spoke the doom that each must face. The just, however, met a far different fate. For them, the passing of days and nights beneath the shining sun brought no toil of hand or sea. They did not labor over the earth for their living, nor struggle upon the wide waters for meager gain. Instead, they passed their days among men honored by heaven, men who had kept their sworn word gladly, and their lives were free from all tears. For the unjust, pain was their companion, a suffering so deep that no eye could bear to witness it. But there were some whose courage was greater still, souls who, 3 times on either side of death, had kept their hearts pure and untouched by wrong. These travelled the road of Zeus himself, leading to the high tower of Kronos. There, upon the islands of the blessed, the winds of Oceanus played gently around the shores. Golden blossoms burned bright, some growing upon the waters, others blooming on the land, upon glorious trees. In that place, wreaths of flowers were woven by hand, and crowns of blooms were set upon the heads of the worthy. Rhadamanthes ruled there with justice, seated at the right hand of the great father, the husband of Rhea, she who held the highest throne. Among the number of these blessed souls were Peleus and Cadmos, and there also was Achilles, brought to that place when the prayers of his mother swayed the heart of Zeus. He who had brought down Hector, the unyielding pillar of Troy, he who struck down Cycnos and Memnon, son of the dawn goddess Eos, now walked among the heroes in the land without grief. In another verse, Pindar spoke of the law of Persephone. For those who had suffered the penalty of their ancient wrongs, she decreed that in the 9th year they would return once more to the light of the sun. From such souls came monarchs, swift men of great strength, and those who were supreme in wisdom. These were remembered for all time as sainted heroes. In the belief Pindar set forth, the journey of the soul was long and layered. Upon death, the soul was judged in Hades, and if found free from guilt, it was sent into the Elysian fields beneath the earth. Twice more it would return to mortal life, and twice more it would die. If through all 3 lifetimes it remained virtuous, then Persephone would grant it a 4th release, not back to the world of men, but to be born into greatness as a king, a hero, or a sage. From that point, the soul was freed forever from the wheel of life and death, and was carried at last to the islands of the blessed in the waters of Oceanus, the final and eternal home of the greatest souls. In another ancient fragment, Aeschylus too spoke of the fate of souls and the distant shining land, where the greatest of them found their rest. Through these tales, the image of Elysium stood as the crown of all journeys, a place earned through the strength of life, the purity of the heart, and the endurance of the soul across the bounds of death. Rhadamanthus, the son of Europa, was one who was spared from death itself, a rare soul who, though still living, no longer walked among the world of men. His eyes were never again seen by mortals, for he had been taken in life to Elysium, the place of eternal peace. Euripides told that Ares, the god of war, would in the end deliver Cadmos and Harmonia from the fate of mortals. He would grant them immortal life among the company of the blessed gods. In that final transformation, they were changed into serpents, and Zeus himself sent them forth to dwell forever in the Elysian fields, where the sorrows of the mortal world could no longer reach them. Pseudo-Apollodorus repeated this tale, saying that both Cadmos and Harmonia, having taken the shape of serpents, were sent away to the Pedion Elysium, where their rest was eternal. In another account, Poseidon lay with the nymph Callino, and from this union came Lycos. The god placed Lycos in the islands of the blessed, the Nesoi Macaron, where the fortunate lived forever in joy. When the Greek army suffered the loss of Achilles, they were overcome with grief, for the greatest among them had fallen. They buried him upon the White Island, Luke placing him beside his dearest companion, Patroclus, and mingling their bones together so they would never be parted. Some say that after his death, Achilles went to dwell with Medea in the islands of the blessed, far from the dust of battle. Menelaus, after returning to Sparta and reclaiming his kingdom, was granted immortality by the hand of Hera. With Helen, he departed the mortal world and was taken to the Elysian fields, where their life would know no end. In another telling, when Telegonus learned from Kirk that he was the son of Odysseus, he set sail in search of his father. In the course of events, he came to hold the lifeless body of Odysseus. He brought it, along with Penelope, to Kirk's dwelling. There, he married Penelope, and Kirk sent them both away to the islands of the blessed, where they would dwell forever. Apollonius Rhodius wrote that when the time came for Achilles to enter the Elysian plain, it was fated that he would be joined in marriage with Medea daughter of Aeetes. Lycophron spoke of Hector of Troy, who after death would live in the islands of the blessed, honored as a mighty hero and protector. It was told that when the land of the Thebans, the sown folk of Ogyges, was struck by a plague, they sought the guidance of the Delphic oracle. The god commanded that they bring the bones of Hector from Troy to the tower of Kalydnos, the high place of Thebes, and there he would stand as their savior. According to ancient scholars, this tower was called the Island of the Blessed because it was the home of the temples of the gods. This telling was seen as a late attempt to explain the older belief that Cadmus, Harmonia, and Hector, like other noble souls, were taken to Elysium after death. Diodorus Siculus, in his history, continued with accounts of this distant and blessed realm, telling of those who had been taken there, whether in life or in death, to dwell forever beyond the reach of mortal fate, in the shining meadows and golden groves where no sorrow came. In these stories, the islands of the blessed, the Elysian plain, and the White Island stood together in meaning, a promise of unending peace for the great and the virtuous, who passed from the shadowed paths of the mortal world into the light that never faded. 7 generations after the great flood of Deucalion, when the world had begun to settle into its new shape and life had taken root once more, there came a man named Macareas. He journeyed to the island of Lesbos, and upon seeing the beauty of its land, he chose to make it his home. The fertile ground, the gentle hills, and the mild air pleased him, and he knew it was a place where life could flourish. Not content with holding only this land, Macareas sought to extend his reach and bring other islands under his control. His first step was to send a colony to the nearby island of Chios, and when that land was settled, he turned his eyes to Samos. From there, his ambition carried him to Kos, which was brought under his hand in the same manner. At last, he dispatched Leucippos with a large company of colonists to the distant island of Rhodes. These islands, set in the path of the breezes and washed by clear waters, possessed air so pure and healthful that those who lived there thrived. Their fields yielded abundant crops, and their stores grew rich, so much so that they became the envy of those who lived beyond their shores. It was for this abundance and for their rare good fortune that they came to be called the Islands of the Blessed, the Nesoi Macaron. Some, however, said that the name came from Macareas himself, for his sons ruled over them after him, and their reigns were long and prosperous. In every age, from ancient days to the present, these islands stood apart for the richness of their soil, the excellence of their location, and the mildness of their climate. No other land surpassed them in their blessings, and so the name they bore was not only an honor, but a truth. They were indeed blessed. Strabo, in his writings, gave another view, one shaped by the desire to set myth within the frame of the known world. He sought to explain the Elysian fields and the islands of the blessed by linking them to real lands. To him, they were the plains of Gades, in the far west where modern Cadiz lies, and the islands scattered off the Atlantic coast. He believed the poet Homer, through hearing of many voyages to the far reaches of Iberia, had learned of the wealth and the rare qualities of those lands. These tales had come to him by way of the Phoenicians, who traded there and spread word of the country's beauty and plenty. In Homer's vision, shaped by such accounts, the home of the blessed and the Elysian plain was set there at the world's end. It was the place Proteus spoke of when he told Menelaus that the deathless gods would lead him to dwell in the Elysian plain, where Rhadamanthes of the fair hair held his place, where life was easy and free from the weight of hardship. In that place there was no snow, No violent storms, no pouring rain. Instead, the river Oceanus sent forth the soft and clear breezes of Zephyrus, the west wind, which refreshed the air without ceasing. Such pure air and gentle breezes belonged by nature to that country, lying as it did in the warmth of the west. And the phrase, "at the ends of the earth," fit that place well, for it stood at the edge of all lands, where the known world met the endless sea. To it, the distant realm at the ends of the earth, where Hades has been mythically placed, so the poet said, stories have long drawn the minds of listeners. In the words of Homer, that place was not shrouded only in darkness and sorrow, but was a land where the souls of the noble and just found rest. Homer, speaking of Rhadamanthys, places him in that region close to Minos, for he tells of seeing Minos himself, son of Zeus, standing tall and glorious with a golden scepter in his hand, giving judgments to the souls of the dead. This vision, not just poetic but persistent, is echoed by the poets who followed, who continued to speak of that place and its rulers, repeating the tales again and again, until they became part of the very rhythm of myth. These later poets even gave names to the islands of the blessed, calling them the Nesoi Macaron, and they pointed out where such islands could be found. They said they were not far from the headlands of Maruzia, just across from the shores of Gades in the far reaches of southern Iberia. It was in this way that myth and geography blurred, and the distant, ideal land where the righteous found eternal peace was believed to lie just beyond the edge of the known world. Pausanias, in his travels through Greece, told a story that linked this idea of the islands of the blessed with a place sacred to Achilleus, found at the mouth of the river Danube, where the Black Sea opened wide. This place was known as the White Island, or Nessos Luik, and it was surrounded by waters and veiled in legend. The island's circumference was 20 stades, and it was covered throughout with forest. There, both wild and tame animals roamed freely, and at the center stood a temple of Achilleus. Within the temple was an image of the hero, preserved for those who came to honor him. The story went that the first to sail to that island was Leonymos of Crotona, a general from a Greek colony in Italy. In his time, war had arisen between the people of Crotona and the Locroi. The Locroi, calling upon their kinship with the people of Epos, had summoned Aias, son of Oileus, the legendary warrior of the Trojan War, to help them in their struggle. In the heat of battle, Leonymos aimed his attack at the part of the field where Aias was said to stand. There, he was struck and wounded in the breast. Weakened by his injury, he journeyed to Delphoi to seek counsel and healing. The priestess of the oracle at Delphoi, speaking with the voice of Apollo, told him to sail to the White Island. She said that there he would be healed, and that Aias himself would appear to him. Leonymos obeyed and made the voyage to the island, and in time his wound was healed. When he returned, he told of what he had seen. On the island, he claimed, he saw Achilles himself, and with him were Aias the son of Oileus, and Aias the son of Telamon. Beside them stood Patroclus and Antilochus, the companions of the Great War. He said that Helen was there as well, and that she was now wedded to Achilles. She had given him a message telling him to go to the poet Stesichoros in Imera and reveal that her anger had caused his blindness. These visions were not questioned, but became part of the belief, part of the understanding that this white island was not just a place of nature, but a home for the heroic dead, a gateway to Elysium. Elsewhere, Pausanias wrote again of Rhadamanthys, saying that Homer, in the speech of Proteus to Menelaus, made clear that while Menelaus would be sent to the Elysian plain, Rhadamanthus was already there. It was his home, his station, earned in life and continued in death. This was not a place that awaited the arrival of the good alone, but one where some were already seated, keeping order, guiding souls, and maintaining the peace of the blessed. Antoninus Liberalis told another tale in which Artemis, after a long passage of time, brought Iphigenia to that same white island. She had once been in the far northern land of the Tauroi in Scythia, but Artemis lifted her away and brought her to be with Achilles. There, in the land beyond sorrow, where death held no power and the air was soft and kind, the two were reunited. In this tale too, the White Island stood as the meeting place of souls who had passed through pain, who had faced the harsh weight of fate, and who were at last granted peace among the blessed who dared. These stories, from Homer to Pausanias, from mythographers to travelers and poets, wove together a shared image of a distant land, a land that stood beyond death, beyond suffering, and beyond the reach of time. It was called by many names: the White Island, the Elysian Plain, the Islands of the Blessed. In every telling, it remained a place of calm air, rich earth, gentle breeze, and eternal rest, where the greatest heroes walked not as shadows, but as themselves, whole and honored in the golden light of immortality. She was changed from a mortal into an ageless and immortal being, no longer called by the name Iphigenia, but instead known as Orsilochia, meaning helper of childbirth. In this transformation, she was lifted from the fate of ordinary mortals and placed among the divine. No longer bound by the passing of time, she became a companion to Achilles, her destiny now tied to the eternal rather than the fleeting. Alcmene, the mother of Heracles, lived a full life and died of old age. After her passing, the sons of Heracles, known as the Heraclidae, performed the rites of burial in her honor. They lived near the Electric Gate at Thebes, a place closely tied to Heracles, where he had spent much of his public life. But Zeus had another plan for Alcmene beyond the resting place prepared for her. He sent Hermes with instructions to take Alcmene's body and bring it to the Isles of the Blessed, the Nisoi Macaron, where she would become the wife of Rhadamanthus. Following the command, Hermes came in secret and took her body from the coffin, replacing it with a stone. When the Heraclidae lifted the casket, they noticed it was strangely heavy. Curious, they opened it, only to find the stone lying where her body should have been. In remembrance, they took that stone and set it in the sacred grove in Thebes, where a shrine now stands in her name, known as the Heroine of Alcmene. Elsewhere, in the epic lines of Quintus Murnius, it was said that the hero Memnon, fallen in war, might now be found either in the halls of Hades or perhaps among the blessed, dwelling in the calm and eternal light of the Elysian plain. Neoptolemus, the son of Achilles, was fated for the same. After his death, his immortal horses, Xanthos and Balios, would carry him across the world to the Elysian plain, to the blessed land, by decree of Zeus himself. These divine creatures, once harnessed for battle, would now serve to carry the soul of the fallen hero to his place of peace. In another passage, the spirit of Achilles appeared to Neoptolemus in a dream. After offering words to his son, he vanished like a swift breath of wind and returned to the Elysian plain. That place, it was said, held a path to the heavens, a road walked only by the blessed, who could rise and descend as if between two worlds, moving beyond the reach of sorrow and into the embrace of eternity. Philostratus wrote that the islands of the blessed were thought to lie near the bounds of Libya, rising near an uninhabited point on the Atlantic coast. These islands, set apart from the lands of the living, were distant, unreachable to most, but forever known in song and story. Ptolemy Hephaestion, in his history, recorded a tale of a child born from the union of Helen and Achilles on these very islands. The child was named Euphorion, a name given in recognition of the land's abundant fertility. The child was winged, and his birth was a symbol of the richness and life that filled the islands of the blessed. Virgil, in his great Roman epic, described Elysium not only as a resting place for the virtuous, but as a full realm within the underworld, bright and serene, where heroes wandered freely, embraced by endless peace. He showed it as a land of joy, hidden beneath the earth, yet lit by its own light, and filled with song and memory. In Ovid's verses, it was said that Achilles never knew the darkness of Tartarus, the empty void of hell, for his soul was taken straight to Elysium, far from pain and fear. Elsewhere, Ovid wrote of Orpheus, the bard whose sorrow filled the world. After his death, his spirit passed into the wind, drifting beyond the sight of mortals. His ghost moved into the underworld, through the places he had seen once before. There, walking again through the Elysian fields, he searched for Eurydice, the love he had lost, and when he found her, he took her in his arms once more, his heart lifted. In that place where no shadows lingered, where grief did not follow, they were together again, silent and complete beneath the soft skies of Elysium. Hand in hand they stroll, the two together. Sometimes he follows as she walks ahead, her steps gentle and light, leading him deeper into the fields of peace. Other times he walks in front, pausing to glance back at her. No danger now, no fear of losing her again. His gaze resting on the one he once lost, but now walks beside in the soft calm of Elysium. No longer were they separated by the sorrow of death. In the fields of the blessed their paths were joined once more, and the light that fell on them was not of the world above, but of a place that needed no sun to glow. The journey of the Argonauts, full of trial and myth, also carried loss. Typhus, the helmsman, who had once guided the great ship Argo through wind and sea, met his end during the voyage. He died far from home, and it was said that from that time onward, he no longer deserved the prayers of any mother hoping her son might find peace in Elysium. His fate, bound to the mortal realm and its ending, stood apart from the blessed peace of the virtuous. Among the tales tied to the White Island, one speaks of the nymph Luke, whose name meant white. She was said to be the daughter of the river Oceanus. Hades, ruler of the unseen realm, took her into the underworld. After her death, she was transformed not into stone or shade, but into a tree, a white poplar, its pale leaves a reflection of her name and her story. In Elysium, this tree stood tall among the groves, and it was sacred to the god who had taken her. When Heracles returned from his descent into the underworld, he wore a wreath of these poplar leaves upon his head, the sign of his passing and return, the sign of the peace that touched even a warrior's brow. In the words of Nonnus, Elysium was described as a place where one might walk through the flowery court of Rhadamanthus, one of the judges of the dead. There, souls moved with grace through the meadows and the groves, picking their way lightly among the blossoms and soft grass. It was not a land of stillness but of quiet joy, where the steps of the departed left no trace, and where each breeze carried the scent of peace. In deeper songs, Elysium was not always set above the world, but beneath it. Pindar spoke of the subterranean Elysium, hidden below but glowing with its own radiance. For those who had earned its rest, the sun shone with its full strength even in the land beneath the earth. While night covered the upper world, light bathed the meadows of the dead. These fields were not grey or dim, but red with roses. The space before the city of the blessed was shaded by trees that dripped incense, and the air was thick with golden fruits. It was a land of colour, of fragrance, and of peace. Some there delighted in horses racing across the endless fields. Others wrestled for sport, their movements light, their contests joyous. Some played at games of chance or of thought, and some walked alone, gathering silence. All around them bloomed the flower of perfect bliss. The very land seemed to breathe contentment. The scent of incense rose constantly from altars where offerings were made to the gods in golden fire. Yet beyond the brightness, beyond the edge of that blessed realm, lay a boundary. On the far side of the fields, the streams of darkness ran slowly. From those sluggish waters rose the gloom of the other world, the endless night of Hades, where no light could ever shine. Pindar also wrote of the path a soul might take through life and death. When a person died, their soul was judged. If they had lived without guilt, they would pass into the Elysian fields. But their journey was not yet complete. Twice more, they would return to the world, reborn into the light of the sun, and twice more they would face death. If, through these 3 lives, their hearts remained untouched by wrong, then Persephone, queen of the underworld, would grant them release. On the 4th time, they would not return to the world. Instead, they would be reborn one final time, not as mere mortals, but as kings, as heroes, or as sages. These souls, marked by wisdom and strength, would be called sainted heroes for all ages to come. Then at last, they would be freed from the cycle of life and death. They would pass beyond the reach of fate, beyond even the subterranean Elysium, to the islands of the blessed that lay in the stream of Oceanus. There, they would dwell forever, the final resting place of the greatest of souls. Even in laughter and play, the memory of Elysium remained. In a comedy by Aristophanes, the god Dionysus makes his way through the underworld. There, he encounters a chorus of the Eleusinian initiates, those who had taken part in the sacred rites of the mysteries. They moved joyfully, making their way to Elysium. Their voices rose in song, not sorrow, and their steps carried them toward a land not of punishment, but of peace. In the shadows of the world below, they danced toward light. And so, in the poems, in the stories, in the memories held in stone and song, Elysium remained. Whether imagined beneath the earth or beyond the edge of the sea, whether reached in dreams or promised through deeds, it stood always as the place of rest. For the just and the brave, for the kind and the wise, it was a destination waiting at the end of all roads, the field where roses never faded, the land where the sun never set, the shore where souls found their final peace. The shades of the Eleusinian initiates could be heard calling from a distance, their voices rising in unison. O Iarchos, O Iarchos, O Lakos. Their chant echoed through the soft air of the underworld, reaching out across the peaceful meadows. And then, one of the living, Xanthias, spoke. He had heard tales of these blessed souls and now saw them with his own eyes, singing the song of Iarchos that had once been composed by a poet for their sacred rites. These were the mystics, the initiates of the Eleusinian mysteries, whose souls were now free to dance and rejoice in the groves of Elysium. They moved with light steps across the green ground, calling upon Iarchos, the power that excels all, the spirit of the mysteries, dwelling in noble temples. They asked him to come down, to tread the verdant level, to join their mystic revel, crowned with wreaths of myrtle, each one a mark of joy and fruitfulness. They asked him to move with them, to mix wild steps with sacred rhythm, to dance beside them as they celebrated the beauty and harmony of the divine graces. They called again and again, "O Iakos, O Iakos," shaking their torches of fire, lighting the way through the dark toward the blessed fields. They begged the youthful god to come without delay, to walk with his chorus, to lead the procession along the sacred way. They pleaded for him to bring joy through his festival song, to stand with them, to never grow tired no matter how long the journey, to blend into the dance, side by side, with the joyful and the holy. With laughter and cheer, they shouted praises, joking, jeering, dancing freely, for in this place, even mischief was embraced in lightness, and no one took offense. The god of laughter, of dance, of wild joy, was at the center of it all. One voice among the chorus noticed a girl among the dancers, her robe torn in the revelry. Through the tatters, the white of her skin was visible, like snow. The sight was not scandalous, but instead a part of the freedom and openness of the place. Here, nothing was hidden, and nothing was shamed. "O Lord of the frolic and dance," they sang again, "Iakos, beside me advance." This Iakos was not just a name, not just a chant. He was the Elysian guide, often seen as a form of Dionysos or even Hermes, and he led the souls of the initiates through the darkness of the underworld, through the lands of shadow, to the bright meadows of Elysium. He was not a god of death, but a god of passage, of renewal, of celebration in the face of the end. Through his light and movement, the souls passed not into silence, but into song. Later in that same vision, Aristophanes showed the initiates again, the chorus of the blessed, moving now toward the roses. "Now haste we to the roses," they sang, "and the meadows full of posies." Their voices were clear, their pace joyful. They were going to the meadows in their own old way, the way they had known in life, through the dances they had learned, the choral steps they had practiced during the festivals. But now, those dances were never ending. They danced not in ritual, but in release, and the Moirai, the fates themselves, had woven these dances only for the holy, only for those who had completed the sacred path. Plato, the philosopher, added another vision. In his Apology, he recorded the thoughts of Socrates before his death. To him, death was not something to be feared. If it was simply the end of awareness, it was nothing. But if it was a change of place, a moving from this world to another, and if the stories were true, if in that other place all the dead were gathered, then what greater blessing could there be? Socrates imagined meeting not only the souls of common men, but the true judges, those who judge fairly. There, he said, would be Minos, Rhadamanthus, Iakos, and Triptolemos, the true guardians of justice, those who had been just in their own lives. These were not the judges who had sentenced him in Athens. These were the immortal judges who ruled in the world beyond, in a place of clarity and truth. And more than that, Socrates imagined the joy of meeting the poets, Orpheus, Musaios, Hesiod, Homer, to sit and speak with them, to hear their thoughts, to learn from them not through their verses, but through their presence, would be worth more than anything. For him, the underworld was not an end, but an opportunity. If it truly was the place of gathering, then death was no misfortune, but a gift. In this way, the chorus of Aristophanes and the words of Plato joined into a single image, a world beyond, not silent and cold, but full of motion and music, a world where the mystics danced, a world where the judges were just, a world where the poets still spoke, And through it all, the meadows bloomed, the firelight flickered, the torches burned, and the name of Aeacus echoed in the air, not as a memory, but as a presence, forever walking beside the blessed on the long sacred road, where each step was light, and every voice was joined in the endless hymn of joy. Die many times over, if these things are true, then death would hold no fear at all. For if, after death, there is truly another place where souls continue on, then the life in that place must be filled with wonder. Imagine arriving there, beyond the limits of this world, and meeting the ones who had passed long ago, not just the famous names remembered in songs and tales, but those who had endured the sting of injustice. One could meet Palamedes, who had once stood among the wisest, and whose life was taken not through fault of his own, but by a false judgment, or Ajax, the great son of Telamon, who fell not in battle, but in grief and silence, or others, too many to name, who had also lost their lives through no fault of their own. To sit with them, to speak with them, to share stories of trials endured, this would not be unpleasant. In fact, it would be the opposite. It would be joy. And even more than the meeting, more than the comparing of sorrows and wrongs, would be the chance to examine them, as one might examine anyone here, to ask questions, to search for understanding, to find out which among them held true wisdom and which only the appearance of it, to continue the work of learning and questioning, even beyond the veil of death. That would be the greatest gift. For who would not long to speak with the one who led the host of Greece to the gates of Troy? Who would not wish to listen to the mind of the one called most clever among mortals? Or to ask Sisyphus about his endless task and the reasons behind it? To speak not just with men, but with women too. Souls from every walk of life, now gathered in one place beyond harm and beyond time. Such conversation would be worth more than anything that could be imagined here. In that place, no one would be punished for such inquiries. For if what the stories say is true, the souls there live on forever. They are immortal now, and they are happier than those who still walk the earth. That alone would be reason enough to face death without dread, to exchange a fleeting life for a lasting one, to leave behind confusion for clarity. If that is what lies beyond, then even the end becomes something beautiful. Plato, in another dialogue, gave a vision of this destiny, one that had been shaped by the laws of an earlier age. In the time of Kronos, there was a law that still holds true among the gods, that those who lived a life that was just and holy upon death would be sent to dwell in the Isles of the Blessed. These islands, separate from the world of sorrow, were places of lasting happiness, where no pain could follow and no evil could reach. But for those who lived unjustly, who acted impiously, another fate awaited them, a darker one. They would be sent to the dungeon of punishment, the place called Tartarus, where they would face the pain and penance their lives had earned. In the early days, during the age of Kronos, and continuing into the reign of Zeus, judgments were carried out by living men. These judges would try other living men on the day they were destined to die. But something was wrong. The cases were judged poorly. Men were sent to places they did not deserve, and the balance of justice was broken. Those who ruled in the afterlife, Platon, the lord of the underworld, and others from the Isles of the Blessed, came before Zeus. They brought their complaint. They had watched men arriving in their realms who did not belong, and others being denied the reward they had earned. Zeus listened. He saw the flaw. The problem was not with the law, but with the judges themselves. The trials were flawed because the men being judged were still alive, still wearing the outer garments of their mortal lives. their wealth, their appearance, their ancestry. All these cloaked their souls. Many of those who had wicked hearts came from noble lines and wore fine clothes. They were surrounded by people who stood as witnesses, claiming that they had lived justly, and the judges who were themselves alive were just as blind. They too were wrapped in flesh, veiled by the distractions of sight and sound. Their bodies dulled their understanding, and so they could not see clearly. The truth of the soul was hidden beneath the outer covering of the body. Zeus saw this and declared that it must be changed. No longer would men be judged while still alive. He said, "We must stop them from knowing the hour of their death, for now they see it coming." The foresight of death gave them time to prepare false appearances, but Prometheus had already been told to take this knowledge from them. That was only the beginning. More changes were needed for justice to be restored. The judgments would no longer take place in the realm of the living, but only after the soul had been separated from the body. Only then could its true nature be seen. Only then could judgment be fair. In this vision, death was not the end of justice, but the beginning of its true form. The Isles of the Blessed were not rewards handed out at random, but places earned only by the purest of lives. And Tartarus was not punishment born of anger, but the necessary price of living wrongly. The soul, once free from the distractions and disguises of the flesh, could finally be seen for what it truly was. And then, and only then, could it find its place, whether in light or in shadow, whether among the blessed or in the realm of correction. This was the law that still stood, passed down from the age of Kronos, carried forward by Zeus and maintained by the gods who watched over the boundary between life and death. It was not cruel, nor kind. It was simply just. And through it, the soul found its way. Through it, the wicked were turned back and the worthy were led forward, to the fields of Elysium, to the shores of the blessed isles, to the place where the light does not fade and the spirit, freed from the weight of flesh, lives on in peace forever. Be stripped bare of all those things before they are tried, for that is the law. No soul can carry into judgment the riches it gathered in life, nor the beauty of its form, nor the praise of its name. When the soul stands before the judges, it must come without any covering. It must be seen as it truly is, stripped of all the outer garments of the world, and the judge too must be the same. Naked, dead, with no distractions of the flesh, no noise from the senses, and no veil drawn over the eyes of truth. The soul must be seen by the soul, judged by what it has become, not by what it seemed to be. No family stands beside it now, no followers, no possessions. It has left behind everything. Only its choices remain. That is what the gods have decreed, that justice may be pure and final and not turned aside by flattery or show. Knowing this law before any others, the god appointed his own sons to carry out the judgment of the dead. From Asia, 2 judges were chosen, Minos and Rhadamanthus. From Europe, 1, Iacchos. These 3, when their own mortal lives were over, were not scattered like other souls but were placed in authority. They sit at the dividing place in the meadow where the road forks in two. One path leads upward to the Isles of the Blessed, the land of those whose lives were holy and true. The other path descends to Tartaros, where those who lived unjustly must now face the weight of what they have done. Those who come from the east are sent before Rhadamanthus. Those from the west are brought to Iacchos. And if there is any doubt, any hesitation in the verdict, then the final decision rests with Minos. He is the one given the golden scepter, the final authority, the last voice to speak the truth in cases of uncertainty. It is he who sits apart watching, guiding, holding the power to declare the soul's direction. so that the great journey of all mankind, from life to death, from birth to silence, may not be misjudged, so that each soul may be given exactly what it has earned. When a soul comes to judgment, it brings nothing but itself. All its natural gifts, its nature, its tendencies, these are now laid bare. Added to them are the layers gathered from experience, the choices made, the desires followed, the habits formed. All these are visible now, like marks upon the soul's surface. And the judge, seeing the soul, does not ask who it was in life, or what city it came from, or how it died. He looks at what the soul has become. Rhadamanthys looks at the souls brought before him from the east. He does not ask their names. He does not know them. He does not need to. He sees clearly. When he sees a soul that is twisted, full of deception, heavy with wrong, he does not hesitate. He sends it away, down the path that leads to Tartaros. No anger, no mercy, only justice. But then sometimes he sees another kind of soul, one that shines quietly, one that carries truth, not as a banner, but as a presence, a soul that has lived in harmony with itself and with others. It may have belonged to a private man, not known for fame or power. It may have been quiet, unnoticed, but now its light is clear, and when Rhadamanthys sees such a soul, he is filled with admiration. He sends it upward to the meadows of the Isles of the Blessed, where it will live in joy, free of pain. Iacchos does the same with those from the west. Holding a rod in his hand, he stands in the field, not as a ruler, but as a servant of justice. He sees and he decides. No ceremony, no delay. Truth alone speaks. Minos, the one with the golden scepter, watches over it all. He listens. He does not act unless he is needed. But when he is called, he speaks with finality. There is no appeal. His voice closes the case, and the soul moves forward, either to punishment or to peace. Socrates once spoke of this law. He remembered the words of priests and priestesses, those who served the mysteries, and who had learned not just to perform the rites, but to understand them. Their teaching was simple. The soul of man is immortal. It does not die when the body dies. It only changes form. It comes to an end, and that end is called death. But after that, it is born again, and again, and again. The soul never perishes. Because of this, life must be lived with care. Every choice matters. Every act leaves a trace. The soul is not just passing through. It is being shaped, and what it becomes will decide where it goes next. For some, Persephone accepts a payment, a soul that has wronged her in the past, but now has changed, now has atoned, may be forgiven. On the 9th year, that soul is returned to the world, brought back to the light of the sun. It is reborn. From these returning souls rise the kings, the heroes, the wise ones. Their greatness is not of strength or power alone, but of the soul that has been tested, that has endured, and has emerged clear. These are the ones who become examples for the rest, and for all the time that follows, they are remembered as the blessed ones, the glorious ones. They do not disappear. They rise again and again until the soul reaches its last form, pure, whole, no longer bound by the wheel of birth and death. And when that time comes, it too is sent forward. It is not sent down. It is not sent back. It is sent to the Isles of the Blessed in the stream of Oceanus, where it will dwell in light, beyond pain, beyond sorrow, beyond time. This is the journey, this is the judgment, and this is the end, which is also the beginning, where the soul, having passed through many lives, finds at last the field where nothing is hidden and nothing is lost, where justice is not given in words, but in the path that opens before the feet, and where, at the end of that path, the the soul comes to rest, not in silence, but in peace. Are they called holy heroes amongst mankind? This title is not given lightly, but is reserved only for the few whose souls have endured, been purified, and emerged shining, cleansed from their ancient afflictions. These afflictions, called pentos in the language of the mysteries, do not mean mere pain or misfortune, but rather a deeper fall, a wrong, a stain upon the soul, the kind that binds it to the wheel of rebirth. Only when this burden is lifted and the soul walks again in light does it earn the name of a holy hero. And these heroes, who have passed through trial and transformation, are said to dwell in the Isles of the Blessed, that final and penultimate resting place of the best of souls, just before the soul's full return to divine origin. Socrates, in the moments before his own death, spoke of these things with clarity. He said the soul, since it is immortal, cannot escape from evil, nor can it be protected from suffering in any other way than by becoming as good and as wise as it can be. Nothing else can save it, not riches, not power, not reputation. The soul takes with it nothing when it departs this world, except what it has learned and how it has been shaped through education and care. These, he said, are the only things that matter. These are the tools that help or harm the soul, beginning from the first step of its journey into the other world. When death comes, it is not the end, but the beginning of movement. Each soul is met by a daimon, a guiding spirit that had been assigned to it in life. This spirit leads the soul to the place where all the dead are gathered. There, in silence and solemnity, the soul is judged. Its life is weighed, not by appearance, not by the judgments of men, but by the truth of its being. Then, depending on what the soul has shown itself to be, it is led further, deeper into the world beyond. For this reason, a guide is needed. The journey is not simple, it is not straight. There is no single road that leads to one destination. Instead, there are many paths, many turns, many branches, each leading to a different end. This is something we understand from the rites and ceremonies performed on earth, especially those of the mysteries. They hint at what lies beyond. They show us in sacred symbols and hidden truths that the journey of the soul is complex, and that each must find its own way, helped by what it has become. The soul that has lived with order and wisdom understands its journey. It recognizes the guide. It follows willingly and clearly, knowing it is being led to its rightful place. But the soul that is impure, that has lived wrongly, that has caused harm through murder or acts of violence or selfishness, is not allowed to choose. It is carried by necessity, pulled by the weight of its own deeds to the place that fits it best. That place is not gentle, it is not light. It is the place of punishment, the prison of Tartaros. But the soul that has walked through life with purity and righteousness is different. That soul finds gods as companions. It is not alone. It is not lost. It does not wander or resist. Instead, it goes forward to dwell in the land prepared for it, the place of peace, the Elysian fields. Later, Socrates explained more of this journey. When the dead have reached the place to which each is led by its daimon, the first task is judgment. The judges look into the soul, not into its history or its fame, but into its essence. They ask whether it lived well, whether it lived with piety, or whether it did not. For some, the answer is not clear. These are the souls that lived neither wickedly nor righteously. They did not do great harm, but neither did they strive toward good. For these souls, the path is different. They are sent to the river Acheron. There, they are given boats. They do not sail alone. They are brought across the waters, carried by vessels prepared for them. And when they reach the other side, They do not enter torment, but purification. They remain at the lake, in quiet places, where the darkness is not cruel, but calm. If these souls have committed wrongs, they are not forgotten, but are given time to face them. They pay what must be paid. They endure what must be endured. In doing so, they are washed clean. Slowly, over time, they are restored. And when the appointed time has passed, when the weight has been lifted and the soul has learned, they are brought again to the light. This process is not quick. It is not simple. The soul may pass through many lives, many deaths, before it is finally free. Each time, it is shaped again. Each time, it remembers something deeper. And when after many long periods of wandering, it reaches the fullness of its journey, then it is no longer bound to the wheel. It is released. Only the soul that becomes pure, that becomes wise, that becomes truly itself, can find its way to the final dwelling. That place is not hidden in darkness, but filled with light. It is not filled with punishment, but with peace. There the best of souls live among the gods, not in chains, but in companionship. These are the holy heroes. These are the ones who return no more to the world of suffering. They are remembered not just in the afterlife, but by those still living. Their names become sacred. Their stories become myths. But their true reward is not in memory nor in fame, but in rest. Their souls dwell in the islands of the blessed, in fields that never wither, where the sky is always calm, and where time has no power. This is what the soul can become. This is what the journey leads to. Not oblivion, but return. Not silence, but truth. Not punishment, but peace. If only the soul can be made ready. And so the soul must learn, must grow, must strive, not for the world, but for itself. Because in the end, it takes nothing with it but what it has made of itself. And that is what decides everything. Doings in Tartaros are assigned according to what each soul has done in life, and so too are the rewards given in Elysium. Everything is weighed carefully. Those who have acted justly, who have lived with kindness, with self-restraint, with honesty, receive rewards that match what they have given. No soul is treated with favor simply for a name or a title. The only thing that matters is the truth of what was done. Some have done a little good and receive a small rest. Others have lived fully in the light and are given joy beyond measure. But there are also those whose wrongs are so great, so deep, that they cannot be corrected. These souls are not only guilty, but also unable to change. There is no part of them left that seeks truth or peace. For these, the place called Tartaros opens wide. This is not a place of temporary punishment. These souls do not pass through and then return. They are cast by the weight of what they are and by the fitting judgment of the gods, into that place from which no return is possible. There they remain, not just as a punishment, but because there is nowhere else they can go. They cannot exist among others. They cannot be released. But the story is not only about punishment. It is also about release. For those who have lived with holiness, who have strived toward goodness, the earth is no prison. These souls are not bound below. They are freed. They rise upward, released from the shadows of the underworld. They do not dwell among the caves and rivers of the dead, but mount upward to the clear lands of peace, to the pure abode above. This place is not found easily. It cannot be seen with eyes. But it is real. It is the final place of reward. Among these are the souls who have lived by philosophy, not just through words, but through practice. Those who have purified themselves through reflection, discipline, and care for the soul. These are the ones who, once freed from the body, do not return. They live without bodies from that point forward. They are not born again into pain or conflict. Instead, They pass into a place more beautiful than words can describe. It is not easy to speak of that place. It is beyond time, beyond motion, and no moment now allows space enough to describe its fullness. Through unrighteous acts, people make themselves alike to that which is evil. When they live in this way, they change their shape, not in the body, but in the soul. They resemble the pattern of darkness, not light. And because they have become like evil, they are drawn to live with others like them. This is the penalty. It is not imposed from outside. It is the natural result of what they have chosen. If they are warned, and if they do not change, they will never reach that blessed place that is free from evil. After death, it will not receive them. And even in life, they will find themselves always among others like themselves, among the unkind, the false, the cruel. Like seeks like, both in this life and in what comes after. Among those who die, some fall in battle, some pass in old age, and some, through their actions, shine more brightly than others. When a man dies with honor, especially in service to others, it is said that he belongs to the golden race. This is not about bloodline or birth. It is about the soul. And Hesiod, the poet, spoke of such men. He said that when someone of this race dies, they become hallowed spirits. They do not vanish. They do not sleep. They remain dwelling upon the earth, invisible to most, but active. They turn away evil. They guard the good. They protect those who speak with reason and kindness. For these, there is a special kind of death. It is not an end, but a transformation. The city must ask the god how to bury such a one, with what rites, with what signs, with what honors. For these are no longer ordinary people. They are of divine quality. Their graves must be tended not as resting places, but as sacred sites. And when others of similar greatness die, even if they lived quietly, the same honors should be given. The soul speaks its truth through its choices, not its noise. Among those who live by wisdom, a few devote their lives to the care of the city, not because they want praise, but because it must be done. These are the ones who study deeply, who think carefully, who act not for gain, but because truth asks it. They become the guardians of the people. They guide without pride. They teach without force. They lead with patience. When their time in the world is finished, they too are not left behind. They go to the islands of the blessed. There they dwell in peace. They are not called back. They are not made to suffer. Their work is done, and their reward is lasting. The cycle is complete. These teachings come not only from poets, but from those who have lived by thought and reason. And yet, even they say that the full beauty of this truth cannot be explained. It must be lived. It must be seen with the soul, not with the eye. Each soul shapes its own end, and the earth, the stars, the gods, they all wait quietly, watching what each soul will choose. Nothing is hidden in the end. The soul becomes what it has chosen to become, and when the last breath is taken, it carries only itself. No gold, no name, only what it is. Those who have lived lightly with justice and mercy rise. Those who have sought wisdom over praise find rest. Those who have loved truth more than power are gathered in light. And those who have done harm, who have taken and broken and lied, they fall, not because they are thrown, but because the weight of what they are pulls them down. Tartaros does not chase them. It waits, and when the soul comes, it belongs there. But the blessed, the holy, the wise, they walk where the air is clear. Their names are remembered not with fear, but with quiet respect. They have crossed the long road, and now they dwell in peace, forever. And the state shall establish public memorials and sacrifices for them, treating them not as mere mortals, but with honors that reach toward the divine. If the Pythian oracle consents, these fallen ones will be celebrated as gods. If the oracle does not approve such divine honors, then still they will be remembered as daimons, as godlike men, souls whose virtue lifted them beyond the common measure of humanity. This sacred treatment is not to be reserved only for men. The same honor must be extended to women as well, for there are among them those who rise up with the same strength of character, the same clarity of soul, and the same noble actions. Such women, when they are found, must be held in equal regard. The state's duty is to recognize every soul that lives with greatness, regardless of the form it wore in life. Achilles, the one whose name echoes through time, was among those who chose the path that leads not to age, but to the eternal. When the gods looked upon his choice, they did not see only a warrior, but a soul who understood love, loyalty, and sacrifice. His mother had told him what would come. If he chose vengeance, he would die young. If he walked away, he would live a long life, growing old far from war. But he did not hesitate. He went to avenge the one he loved, knowing that in doing so, he would meet his own end. He chose to follow the one who had already fallen, and for this, the gods honored him greatly. They gave him his place among the souls in the Isles of the Blessed, for he had chosen not glory, but the deeper bond of loyalty. And the gods, watching, gave him eternal reward, not only for his courage, but for the love he carried into death. Philocus, the poet too, was called blessed. His path was not through the battlefield, but through words. As he passed from the world of the living, the voice of a final verse followed him. "Go your path," it said. "Go your path, Philocus, to the fair land of the God-fearing dead." With ivy around his head, the sign of divine inspiration, and his poetry flowing like a river, he departed in a song. He went with revelry, not sorrow, into the islands of the blessed, where the souls of those who walked in beauty now dwell. Another voice, that of old age, spoke of the coming journey. The poet Pausanias, nearing the end of his time, longed to walk the mystic path. He did not fear death, for he knew where the path would lead. "I am fain," he said, "to go the mystic road to Rhadamanthys." This was no cry of fear, but of calm acceptance. His people would miss him, the community would remember him, but he would step forward, guided by unseen hands, to the judgment that awaited all. For Eupreppius, the words were even more clear. "His soul is in the gatherings of the blessed," said the epitaph. He had not gone to the river Acheron, the passage into the common underworld. He had not been swept into the shadows. Instead, his soul had risen. It had found its way to the assemblies of the good. In that land, it was said, truly good men do not die. They move into something else, something enduring. For them, Elysium is not a place of ending, but of true life. And Eupreppius, by virtue of his deeds, had reached that place. In Roman vision, too, the story was told. Anchises, the father of Anias, came not in form but in dream. From beyond the veil, he spoke to his son. "Come to me," he said. "Seek me in the depths, where the halls of the dead lie hidden. Come through Avernus, but do not fear, for I am not in Tartarus. I dwell in Elysium, among the sweet assemblies of the blessed." He was not lost, he was waiting, and he told his son how to find him. The Sibyl would lead the way, bearing the offerings needed to pass. And when that time came, the Sibyl stood before the great divide. "Here," she said, "the road parts." One path turned to the right. It ran beneath the walls of the house of the dead, but it did not lead into darkness. It led to Elysium. The other road, turning to the left, fell into punishment. That path led to Tartarus, where the wicked were bound and the guilty were made to suffer what they had earned. But the right-hand path led to light. Through the verses of the Aeneid, the poet Virgil painted the journey with full detail. He showed the turning of the path. He showed the light and the shadow. He showed the choice and the reward. He showed that the journey of the soul was not a fall into nothingness, but a movement into truth. In Elysium, the spirits did not weep. They gathered. They remembered. They lived again in a form beyond sorrow. This was the final truth spoken across all these voices, that the soul does not vanish, that deeds are not forgotten, that the good, the brave, the wise, and the true do not simply fall into silence, but rise into a realm where peace does not end, where the warrior, poet, ruler, or citizen, the soul that lives well is lifted. It is not judged by fame, but by the purity of its actions, by the love it gave, by the truth it held close. And when it is time, that soul goes forward, not into fear, but into clarity, not into forgetting, but into honor, not into shadow, but into the isles of the blessed. And there it remains, not still, but at rest, not alone, but among others who have also walked the long road and reached the final light. He turned and moved ahead, and she followed close behind, and so did the man who had come seeking his father. They climbed the gentle slope in the dim land where shadows lingered, and every step took them nearer to a brighter space, where the air felt warmer and clearer, and the light seemed to come not from one sun, but from 100 unseen stars that never set. The gloom began to fade as they rose, and soon the quiet hum of voices reached their ears, soft, steady, like a breeze moving through tall grass. The sounds led them onward, past groves where leaves never withered, and past rivers whose waters were so pure they glowed faintly in the dark. Flowers that never wilted lined the banks, their colors soft but rich, and the scent in the air was light and sweet, like spring always beginning. In that land of joy, the ground itself seemed gentle beneath their feet, and though they moved through it, the breeze carried no chill, only calm. In wide meadows, souls of the blessed walked and danced. They sang songs with no bitterness in their voices, only peace. Some played games upon the grass, smiling as they moved in graceful patterns. Others gathered near the banks of the great river that flowed with silver light, where music rose from unseen places, joined by the gentle song of the current. The air shimmered there as if time itself walked more slowly in that place. Near the heart of that realm stood the ancient trees, their branches heavy with green and gold leaves, never falling, always full. Around their roots sat poets, singers, and those whose words had once moved the hearts of others. Their faces were quiet, but not dull. They looked as if they still heard beauty where others heard silence. There, seated upon a rise above the stream, stood a man with a presence both strong and still. He was taller than the rest, with eyes that held stories older than words. His head was crowned with a white band, and though his body bore no weight, he stood as if carved from truth itself. The guide stepped forward and asked him in a voice respectful but steady, where the one they sought could be found. He listened, nodded slowly, and spoke not many words, but enough to lead them on. He pointed to a path winding through the grove, and as they followed, the land opened further. The grass grew softer, the light gentler still, and soon, from beyond a grove of trees that whispered softly without wind, came the sound of quiet movement. There, among the blossoms, by a stream that flowed without end, they found him, the one the traveler had longed to see. He stood not as a ghost, but as a presence, clear and calm, watching the stream with the patience of one who has learned the shape of time. His eyes met those of his son, and though no words passed between them then, something fuller than speech passed between their hearts. It was not the meeting of strangers, nor the return of the lost. It was a quiet reunion beyond sorrow, beyond even joy, as if the very world had held its breath to allow it. The air grew warmer around them, and the trees stood silent as if they too listened. Time paused in that place, not because it had stopped, but because it was no longer needed. They stood, not in shadow, but in the land of peace, where memory and hope walked side by side, where every moment was full, and nothing more had to be said. And around them, in that land of the blessed, others moved, not hurriedly, but with purpose shaped by rest, souls who had lived with wisdom, who had earned quiet through struggle, and who now lived in light. That place, beyond pain, beyond worry, was not a reward but a return, like finding home not in a building, but in a feeling that had always waited. The trees, the waters, the gentle hills, none of them spoke, yet all of them seemed to welcome every soul as if it had always belonged. In that place, nothing was forgotten, but nothing hurt. The memories that once burned in life now glowed gently, warm rather than sharp. Songs were sung not for others to hear, but because the soul itself wanted to sing. And so they stayed there a while, not long, not short, just enough. Then, as the guide gently reminded them, the path called again. But something had been restored, something quiet and deep, and when they turned to leave, the land did not fade. It stayed behind them, not lost, but carried. And though the path led downward once more, toward the world of breath and time, the light of that higher place clung softly to their hearts, like a star remembered just before morning. Then, as the journey unfolded through that sacred place, they reached a point where the ground had never before been walked by mortal feet, and from that high place a view opened of the shining fields below. The path descended from the mountaintops, leaving behind the peaks bathed in otherworldly light, and guiding them gently downward into a broad green vale. In this quiet valley, far removed from noise or unrest, sat a man in deep thought. His gaze moved slowly over the land, but not aimlessly. He was watching, counting, remembering. He was surveying the imprisoned souls who waited patiently for their turn to rise again, to live again, to take once more the breath of the upper world. Each one had a name, a fate, a story waiting to unfold. He was tracing not just their presence, but their paths yet to come, the ways they would walk, the work they would do, the roles they would play in the world above. It was there, in that silence filled with futures, that he lifted his eyes and saw the figure approaching. And though the distance was still great, the shape, the stride, the bearing, he knew them all. A sudden light filled his face, and as he stood, his hands stretched out instinctively. His arms opened with longing and love, tears pouring from his eyes as a cry rose unbidden to his lips. His heart reached across that meadow with a strength no shadow could dim, for the one who approached was his son. And the meeting, long delayed, long dreamed of, became real in that moment, not in speech, but in presence, not in reason, but in recognition. As this reunion breathed its quiet joy into the valley, something else drew the son's eyes away. In a more hidden part of that same vale, where tall trees rustled softly and the ground held the hush of old growth, he saw a grove unlike the others. There, the branches hung low, brushing the tops of wild grasses, and a river wound silently through the shade. It was not just any river, it was Lethy, the stream of forgetting. Around its banks clustered crowds, spirits without number, gathered in great flocks like bees in summer fields, floating from one bloom to another, humming with life even in the stillness. They moved with a kind of silent urgency, drawn to the water, hovering in the soft light like petals caught on a breeze. The sight startled him, for he could not guess why so many waited by that quiet stream. He turned to his guide with a question in his eyes. What was this place? And why did so many press close to those waters? And then came the answer, gentle but clear. These were souls who were destined to return. The river was Lethy, whose waters brought forgetfulness. These spirits, after drinking from it, would forget the lives they had lived, the pain they had borne, the joys they had known, and they would be born again into new bodies, new lives, new chances. The cycle would begin again, for fate had ordered it so. The father then turned to his son, eager to explain more, and to share with him the meaning behind it all. He told him that he had long wished to show him this very sight, to reveal the future, not just of strangers, but of his own people, of his children's children, the seed of a great line. This was not a place of endings, but of beginnings. And the son, puzzled, asked again, was it truly so, that these souls would rise once more into flesh, forgetting all that had come before? Why, he wondered, would they wish to return to such burdens, to chains of the body, when peace already surrounded them? And so the father began his deeper answer. He explained that all the universe, sky and sea, moon and stars, earth and flame, was sustained by one great spirit. Within that spirit, all life found its origin. The minds of men, the wings of birds, the strength of beasts, even the strange shapes of sea dwellers, all came from this same source. It was a fire, bright and divine, pure and strong. Yet when this fire took form within the flesh, it was dimmed, weighed down by the body's heaviness, clouded by the limitations of mortal form. That weight brought fear, desire, grief, and longing. Souls trapped in their earthly frames lost sight of the light they came from. They moved in darkness, not always seeing what lay beyond. Even after death, he said, the soul was not fully free. It carried the marks of the life it had lived, the habits it had formed, the injuries it had done to others and to itself. These stains, deep-set and stubborn, could not be cast off at once. They clung like smoke, like shadow. And so each soul, after death, was purified, not by ease, but by trial. Some were exposed to the empty winds, stretched out to be cleansed. Others were washed in great swirling floods. The stains of the past were slowly worn away. This, he said, was why the journey did not end with death. For some, it was just the middle. Those who had lived unjust lives, full of harm and falsehood, bore the heaviest burdens. But those who had tried, who had reached for truth, who had walked with honor even when they fell, were given another chance. Once purified, they would drink from Lethy, forget the weight of past lives, and rise again into the light, to live new stories, to seek new truths, to become new people. And so, looking upon the river, with its quiet current and the gentle souls who gathered there, the son began to see not a place of endings, but of hope. The water that took away memory also made room for new beginnings. The grove was not a grave, it was a gate. The wind in the trees was not mourning, but promise. And those who waited there did not wait in sorrow, but in quiet readiness for whatever came next. Then the father, with love in his voice and eternity in his eyes, turned once more to the fields and pointed out each soul. He named their destinies one by one, their victories, their challenges, their place in the great unfolding of time. He spoke not with pride, but with peace, for he knew that every soul had its season, every life its light, every path its meaning. And standing beside him, The son listened, not as a warrior or a leader, but as a soul among souls, ready to remember, ready to forget, ready to walk forward into the mystery of what must come, or burned out by fire until the long flow of time, measured not in days but in cycles, at last completes its turning and cleanses what was once deeply stained. Each soul, in its own way, passes through this necessary purgation, through the pain of winds, or the weight of water, or the purifying heat of flame. The spirit sheds its ancient burden. Only when the dross has been cleared away does the pure flame remain, clean, bright, untouched by the heaviness of past wrongs. This is the spirit in its truest form, and only then is it allowed to pass into Elysium. But not all reach that land of peace. Only a few, those who have endured their trials and let go of their flaws, come to rest in those wide fields of joy. For most, it is a journey that stretches across ages, 1,000 years of circling time. Only when that time is fulfilled are they brought together once again, summoned in great number to the quiet flow of Lethy's river, where they will drink and forget. They let go of their memories, both joy and sorrow, and once more feel the desire to return to the world above, to take on the weight of a body, to live again without remembering who they were. At this point, the father paused. He took his son gently by the hand, and together with the priestess who had guided them, led him deeper into the great throng that had gathered. There, in the heart of that quiet crowd, he found a mound that rose slightly above the plain, giving him a view across the whole region. From there, they could see the long, winding stream of souls flowing like a living river through the fields. The father raised his hand and began to point out the faces, one by one. These were not just shades of the past. They were the promise of the future. He showed him the glory that would belong to their line, the destiny held in store for the people who would bear their name. He spoke of the future children of Italy, the great ones waiting their turn to be born. With clear words, he named the souls who would one day be kings, leaders, heroes, those who would shape the world with courage and wisdom. The son looked upon these yet unborn figures with wonder, seeing not just what would be, but what must be. Each soul carried with it the spark of fate. As they wandered through the airy plain, their steps quiet on the grass, they passed groups of souls who still moved freely, looking and listening, gathering the strength they would need for their next life. They moved without sorrow or fear, as if each step brought them closer to something they had always known. Around them, the air shimmered with light, and the breeze carried whispers of songs too ancient to name. In this land, at the farthest edge of rest and memory, stood the two gates of sleep. These gates were not guarded by stone or locked by iron, but they marked a crossing nonetheless. One was made of horn, simple, strong, and clear. Through it passed the true shades, those whose dreams were honest and whose visions spoke of things that were. The other gate shone like ivory, polished smooth and bright. But through it came dreams that deceived, shadows that misled. From that gate rose the illusions, the false images that tricked the living and stirred the minds of those above. This was the place where choice was made, where souls passed upward into light or faded into lies. After showing all this and saying all that needed to be said, the father turned toward the gate of ivory, and though he had spoken truths and walked through places filled with memory, it was through this shining gate that he sent his son and the priestess. Through it, they passed back into the world above. The son, still holding the memory of what he had seen, made his way to the ships once more. He returned to the place where the living waited, where time moved forward, and where the future he had glimpsed would one day unfold. Elsewhere, Poets and thinkers would remember Elysium in their own ways. Some would say that even the goddess of the underworld, once reclaimed by her dark husband, no longer wished to return to the world above. The fields of joy held her fast, and the beauty of the Elysian plains softened even her sorrow. Others would describe how, along the foul river that split the afterlife, two paths stretched forward. One was for those who had deceived and harmed, whose lives had carried betrayal. They moved away in shame, ferried across in silence. But the other group, crowned with flowers and carried by a gentle breeze, floated toward the meadows, where roses bloomed and music whispered in the trees. This was their reward, the soft peace of Elysium. In some writings, faraway islands were spoken of, lands facing the western sea, where no frost fell and no war stirred. The people there lived in ease, blessed by their nature. These were said to be the Fortunate Isles, the islands of the gods. Some believed they were real, scattered in the ocean beyond the reach of mortal ships. Others said they were dreams of what lay beyond life's edge. Still others wrote of the deep laws of that world, of the judgment that governed the dead. Even the shades had their order. Not every soul could wander freely. Some were held back, bound by law, kept from crossing the final bank of the dark river. Only those whose path had been clear and right were allowed to pass on, to be free of the shadows. And so, through poetry, prayer, and vision, Elysium became not just a place, but a promise, a land beyond hardship, where the best of all people might one day arrive, where warriors, poets, priests, and lovers would find their peace, where the music never ended and the breeze was always kind, where light came from within the soul, and where the soul itself at last was clean. There, in the wide fields under a gentler sun, they would live without fear, not forever in the way mortals imagine, but in a way that no longer needed time. And so, the tale of that place, spoken by one father to his son, lived on, quiet and eternal, waiting in the space between memory and dream. Lethy had not yet received him. The soul still lingered, not yet washed in forgetfulness, not yet quieted by the silent stream that gave peace to the dead. But now, from the edge of the shadowed world, one soul was called to move beyond pain and into calm. The boy, who had taken his own life in obedience to the word of prophecy, was sent not to the sorrowful regions, but instead to Elysium. Though his land was cursed, though the spirits of his country were denied those bright meadows by ancient wrath, he alone was carried away, far from the gloomy mouth of Tartarus. He was placed where the blue sky would not welcome those of Aegean descent, but it opened gently above him. His body, still whole, lay undisturbed by bloodthirsty beasts. His clothes remained clean, and his limbs were untouched. The forest around him seemed to hold its breath, and the birds above flew in quiet arcs, as though mourning. Even nature, in all its wildness, paused to honor his sacrifice. They watched over him, where he rested beneath the open sky, not in a tomb, but beneath the heavens of Elysium. Later, in the rites of necromancy, when the veil between the worlds thinned and voices called to those beyond, the spirits were summoned to rise. The seer cried out into the dark. "Let all the shades come forth," he said, "and let none hold back. Let there be one way, one path, for the return of souls to the world of light. Let not the dead be divided in their return." And so, the daughter of night, the keeper of ghostly paths, and the silent guide with the staff of power, gathered the souls. They came in two separate groups. One was led gently, those who had lived justly, whose lives were marked by honor and kindness. These were the spirits of Elysium, drawn out with grace. The other group, far more numerous, was made of those who had done wrong, whose lives had carried sorrow and crime. These were led by one of wrath, by the avenger who watched over punishment, and their steps were heavy as they moved back toward the light. Another soul, still living, was drawn into the realm below, not by death, but by the shaking of the earth. The ground opened, and he fell through, his armor still clinging to him. He came not as a whisper or a wisp, but with the full weight of life and body, and the dead, quiet in their eternal peace, were shaken. They saw him fall, and for a moment the order of death was broken. The guards of the underworld had not marked him, no branch had purified him, no gate had received him. The queen of the dead had not placed her seal upon him. Even the weavers of fate, who cut the thread of life, had not yet touched his strand. His arrival startled them, and only then in fear did they finish the task. The thread was cut not with calm but with a shudder, and the souls of Elysium turned their heads in wonder. Those who lived in joy and light looked back, surprised by the noise. Even those who dwelled deeper still, in thicker night, paused to hear. But soon it was asked, had the ruler of the dead shown pity? Was the hero now allowed to rest in the groves where blessed birds sang? Had he been given peace after all, to watch the flocks of joy in Elysium? It was a question whispered among the souls, for to dwell there was not a punishment, but a reward. Elsewhere, beneath the rocks of a smoking mountain, 3 figures shone brightly. In the green hills and flowering meadows, the goddess of the hunt walked with quiet pride, and the goddess of wisdom stood firm in her armor. And there, shining beside them, was the queen of the underworld. But she was not draped in sorrow. Here, in the land of eternal calm, she appeared not as a prisoner, but as a sovereign, radiant among the nymphs of the valley. Together, they walked through the groves where the flowers did not wither and where the air never burned. On the banks of Lethy, where the stream ran soft and slow, another spirit moved gently. A guide had come, one who needed no words, and with quiet hands he touched the edge of the boy's cloak. The dead boy stirred, not in fear, but in recognition. And then the guide lifted him, raised him from the earth and held him close. The child, no longer weighed down by pain, felt joy return. And so the guide carried him for a long time, holding him in the crook of his arm, walking slowly along the silent banks. In his hand, he offered the small tokens of that peaceful land, branches that would never bear fruit, birds that would never sing. For in Elysium, even stillness was a gift. Thus the souls, the shades, the forgotten and remembered, moved softly through a world where time was not counted in days, but in the still rhythm of eternal ease. The gates to this realm did not creak or groan. They did not close behind with fear. Instead, they opened like a breeze lifting through a field. And those who passed through them did not forget themselves. They became, for the first time, what they had always truly been. This land, spoken of in prophecy and poem, known to those who waited and to those who grieved, remained untouched by the storms of the world above. It was a place of pause, of memory without pain, of life without burden. And those who came here, no matter how they had fallen, if they came with light in their hearts, were welcomed, not with trumpets or crowds, but with quiet recognition. The trees knew them, the rivers knew them, the stars, gentle and near, looked down and knew them. And here they would stay, not forever in the way men speak, but forever in the way the soul understands. And pale flowers with bruised blossoms lined the gentle paths where the souls wandered, each petal softened by time, each stem bound by memory, yet not broken. Here, in this place beyond sorrow, there was no command to forget the living. Rather, memory was allowed to stay, quiet and tender, like a flame that did not burn, but only gave light. The spirit there still remembered the one he loved, and though the ties of earth had been cut, the feeling was not forbidden. Heart was still bound to heart, and affection passed freely between the living and the dead. The boy who mourned was not cast aside, but his sorrow was known and shared, and even the shade took part in the tenderness, reaching across the veil with a gentleness that only the dead could hold. Then rose a cry of joy among the quiet souls. "Rejoice," it was said, "you calm ones who dwell beside the stream of Lethy. Rejoice, you halls of Elysium, so long still and unstirred." The shrines were to be crowned with garlands once more, and festive fires were to burn again upon altars hidden deep within the groves. A spirit was coming, a spirit not sorrowful, but happy, though his son wept for him still. And because he was so deeply mourned, the joy of his arrival was even greater. The shrieking ones were told to go, the punishers were driven away, and even the triple-headed beast that kept the gates was told to be silent. The path was to be clear for this soul, this gentle one who came not in fear but in honor. He would pass into the presence of the silent ruler, stand before the throne of the underworld, and give thanks with his final breath. He would ask, not for himself, but for his child above, to live long, to carry on. There were others who had come close to this place, who had felt the pull of Lethy and heard its waters nearby. One had nearly been taken, nearly swept into the stillness, and in that moment had heard the river's whisper. The border of that world had come near, but then life had held on, and the soul had turned back. Yet in that moment, the other world had been known. In the quiet meadows beyond Lethy, souls walked freely among heroes and the blessed. There was no torment here. There were no flames, no punishments, just wide fields and shaded places where the wind was soft. The groves were not wild but peaceful, filled with the voices of those who had lived well. Some were kings, some poets, some only known for their love or service, but all were here because they had left behind a memory that glowed gently in the hearts of others. To this place, those who were kind and just were gathered, their steps no longer hurried, their voices calm. In that realm, there were no shrieking spirits, no chains, no cries. Instead, it was said, when a soul arrived who had been deeply loved, when one came whose memory still lived in the breath of a spouse, then the queen of the underworld gave a sign. She called for torches, not of fire but of joy, and the heroines of old came out from among the trees. They lit the way with brightness, they scattered the shadows, and they spread flowers not of the earth but of Elysium. These flowers had never known decay. They fell like blessings, not like farewells. In those same meadows, where the grass did not wither and the trees never broke, poets from distant times gathered. There the soul who had joined them sang too. Though he had once walked among men, now he stood beside the great voices, not as a lesser, but as one of their own. The songs blended, the words rose into the stillness, and nothing was forgotten. Not pain, but the beauty found after it. For one father, the path to this place had not been harsh. The gate had not groaned. There had been no terror. His final sleep had come gently, like drifting into rest. He had passed into the shadows, not with struggle, but with peace, and the world below had received him quietly. But the son he left behind had not known peace. He had cried out, had torn the silence with his grief, and so he pleaded, not for the past to be undone, but for the journey ahead to be kind. He begged that the Watchers of the Dead, the queen who ruled the shades, would show mercy, that the dark flames would stay away, that the serpent-haired punishers would not approach, that the beast at the gate would not bark, that the monsters would not rise, that the valleys would hide their horrors, that the ferry would come gently, and the boatman would guide the old souls softly to the shore. There, he hoped, the grasses would hold him, not hard ground, but a cradle of earth and peace. He asked that the spirits of joy, the blessed ones, and the ancient bards of his people would greet this soul, that they would bring garlands made of the forgetful blooms, those of Lethy, that they would lay them down one by one, not in mourning but in welcome. For here was one who had lived with honor, one who had loved well, one who had earned the right to rest where sorrow did not reach. And in this place, among the grasses, the light did not fade. The stars above were not like those of the world above. They did not burn cold or blink away. They stayed steady and calm, as if watching over the ones who no longer had to watch the turning of days. Time there was a soft river, not rushing but flowing, and the ones who walked beside it were not ghosts, but souls, the true selves of those who had endured. No longer did they carry burdens. No longer did they run or flee. They stood, sat, sang, wandered. They remembered only what was worth remembering. And when they met one another, it was not with suspicion or fear, but with recognition. For in Elysium, all souls were equal in peace. There was no envy. There was no ambition. Only the echo of lives well lived, gently humming in the grasses and drifting through the air like a song that never ends. Soul, come forth from the edge of shadow, for the river Lethy lies before you, gentle and still, marking the border not of punishment, but of peace. It does not rage or roar like the rivers of the upper world, but glides in silence, its waters touched not by sorrow, but by soft forgetfulness. This river guards the grove, the sacred grove of Elysium, where the feet of no tormentor tread, where the cries of the Furies are never heard. In this grove no one is hunted, no one is haunted. There, even in the world of the dead, it is always day. The light is soft like morning, but never fades like evening. The air moves gently and carries no heat, no cold, only the lightest breath of calm. It is the kind of air that one might think belongs only in dreams, and yet it is more real than the suffering left behind. It is like the air of heaven, but held here for those who have earned rest. And beyond, the gates wait. Of the two paths from the land below, one shines with ivory, beautiful but false, letting out dreams that deceive, that twist memory, that echo lies. But the other, the gate of horn, stands firm and clear. It is not as polished, but it is true. Through this gate, the honest visions pass, the dreams that bring wisdom and remembrance. When the time is right, soul, you may walk through it, and through that gate, you may return in dream to those you once taught, still sharing your wisdom, even if only in sleep. As the living sun descended, it did not vanish entirely. Instead, its light, though gone from the world above, sank below, beneath the ocean's far edge, and there it lit another realm. The same sun, still glowing, brought warmth and light to the land beneath the earth, to that place where the blessed now dwell, not in darkness, but in eternal twilight. There, beneath the world, where life once ended, light still moves across quiet fields. In that land of peace, a goddess appeared, shining in the dark halls of the underworld, not as a figure of terror, but as a queen of gentle rule. She stood, not with chains, but with presence. She was known above and below by many names, but here She spoke softly, like a mother, and greeted the soul that had just arrived. To the one newly born into the mysteries, she offered a vision, not of fear, but of home. "Here," she said, "is where you will dwell now in the fields of Elysium, not as a wanderer, but as one welcomed. I, who now stand before you, will be with you. I shine in the shadows, reign in the depths, and even where the Styx weens deepest, I bring light." And so Elysium was not a land of forgetting. Though Lethy flowed near, it was a land where one could remember rightly, where memories no longer caused pain, where every face once loved was recalled in peace. The dead there were not cast away, but called the blessed. They had passed through the gate, not of loss, but of arrival. In a later time, a word was used, Macareas. It meant the Blessed One, and so death itself was given a name that meant peace. She was called the daughter of the Lord of the underworld, not to frighten, but to offer comfort. People said, not in sorrow, but in reverence, "Go to blessedness," meaning not to vanish, but to enter that realm where suffering had ended. It was a soft way of saying goodbye, not harsh, not final. And even when people spoke it in jest, it held a deeper truth, that even death could carry beauty. Macareas, it was said, was not alone. Others had been named, others who marked the land of the blessed with their presence. Some called her Luke, the White One, like the soft light in the Elysian fields. Others gave her titles tied to the isle she ruled, but always the meaning was clear. Elysium was not a place of torment, but of return. There the soul could rest. There the voice no longer trembled. There the heart no longer broke. And so the journey ended not in fear, but in welcome. The river Lethy, though it took memory, gave peace. The grove it bordered was not silent with emptiness, but full of quiet voices. The gate of horn did not deceive. The air there did not sting, and beyond it all, the queen of the underworld did not chain, but crown the dead with calm. There, soul, you will walk. There you will sit among others who once struggled, who once hoped, who once lost and gained and wept like you. But here they weep no more. Their eyes shine not from tears, but from light. And as you join them, you do not lose yourself. You become more yourself than ever before, not weighed by the body, not bound by pain, but free. And in that place, though the world above continues its turning, you are no longer hurried. Time does not chase you. You are not late. You are not early. You are exactly where you are meant to be. Not punished, not forgotten, but blessed. Go now into the grove, cross the river, breathe the air, find the gate, and if the dream comes, let it come through the horn and bring peace to those who sleep above. For you, soul, are in Elysium, and there all is calm.